John, I've sometimes been embarrassed by the fact that I've been interested theologically in eschatology, the doctrines of the future. And you've given me new encouragement because you've said, at least in the Christian tradition, that Christianity shouldn't lose its nerve to talk about eschatology. This is critical to your theology, and I really want to explore that.
Yes, I think it's very important to face the issues. Every science... Yes, I think it's very important to face the issues. Every story that science tells ends in death. For you and me, it'll end in death. For the universe itself, over many, many billions of years, it'll eventually end in futility, probably in just ever increasing cold and dilution. And that raises a serious question. What, if the world is a creation, what's God up to if it all ends in futility? And of course, notoriously, Stephen Weinberg, taking his purely horizontal scientific attitude, said the more he understood the universe, the more it seemed to him to be pointless if it's going to end up in that sort of way. But science's horizontal story is not the only story to tell. There is a vertical story that theology tells of God's faithfulness. And so if there is a destiny beyond death, if there is a true meaningfulness to the universe, then that requires looking in that theological direction.
So we have no choice but to look there if we're going to take seriously the theistic hypothesis.
I believe so. And that's a point that Jesus made, actually, when he had an argument with the Sadducees, who didn't believe in a destiny beyond death. And he said, remember, the God's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he said, the God not of the dead, but of the living. In other words, if the patriarchs mattered to God once, and for sure they did, then they will matter to God forever. God won't just toss people aside.
So we have two problems that you articulated well. One is our own personal deaths.
Right.
The second is the apparent increasingly accelerating expansion of the universe, which will end in futility.
Right.
So how do we deal with those issues?
Well, I think those two problems find their solutions together, actually. They're combined together. One has to ask the question, can you make a credible understanding of a destiny beyond death for human beings? And when you begin to think about that, you see it's going to involve two different requirements. One is continuity. I mean, it really must be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob who live again in the kingdom of heaven, not new characters given the old names for old time's sake. So there must be continuity, but equally, of course, there must be discontinuity, in the sense there's not much point in making Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob alive again if they're going to die again. So you have to have both continuity and discontinuity. Now, when you think about the continuity side of things, what could make those people the same people that lived on earth before? The traditional answer has been the soul, and very often it's been understood in Platonic terms as some sort of spiritual bit of us, liberated at death and persisting and carrying on. I think that that's a mistake. I mean, I think we are psychosomatic unities, as people say, that we are animated bodies rather than animated souls. We're not apprentice angels. We are embodied human beings. And that, of course, is essentially what the Bible, both in the Hebrew Scriptures and the New Testament, sees human beings as being. So if we've lost that picture of the spiritual soul, have we lost the carrier of continuity? I don't think so. But we will have to reconceive it. In fact, it's quite difficult to understand what's the carrier of continuity for a person in this life. I mean, here am I, aging, balding academic. What makes me the same person as the little boy with the shock of black hair in the school photograph of many years ago? It's not atomic material continuity. The atoms in my body are totally different from the atoms in that schoolboy. It's not the atoms, but the pattern in some extraordinary, elaborate and complex sense in which those atoms are organized. And I think that's what the human soul is. It is the information-bearing pattern, which is the real me. And that's actually what Aristotle thought, and also what Thomas Aquinas thought, following Aristotle in the Middle Ages. Now, that pattern that's me will, of course, dissolve with the decay of my body at death. But if I believe in a faithful God as I do, it's perfectly coherent hope that God will remember that pattern. That's not keeping me alive, but will remember the pattern, not to lose it, and will reconstitute that pattern in an act of resurrection. Christian hope has always been death and resurrection. The Jewish hope also, of course, death and resurrection in that sense. So I have to be re-embodied, because that's what I am as a human being, if I'm truly to live again. That's the continuity side of things. The discontinuity side of things is that I'm not made alive again in order to die again. So though I'm going to be embodied, I must be embodied in some new form of matter, so to speak, rather than just ordinary matter. And I believe it's perfectly coherent to believe that God can bring into being such a new form of matter. You see, why do we die in this world? Why is this a world of transience and decay? The answer essentially is the second law of thermodynamics. And it says that disorder always in the end wins over order. And it wins simply because there are many, many ways of being disorderly and very few ways of being orderly. So that's the winning ticket in the end. But I think it's perfectly coherent to believe that God could bring into being a new form of matter with such self-organizing principles that drift to futility, that thermodynamic drift to futility, would no longer be present. And where would that matter come from? I believe it would come from the redemption of the matter of this world, that when the universe dies in futility, God will redeem it and produce a new creation to replace the old creation. It's not a second creation out of nothing, as a second go to try and do it better the second time, so to speak, but it's a creation out of the old, ex vetera, as people say.
And this would mean gathering together all the disparate radiation that the far, far universe would entail? It
would involve the transformation of the whole show. And of course, obviously, it's very hard to think about that. Of course, as a Christian, I believe that process has already begun in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I believe the reason that the tomb was empty was that the Lord's body was transformed into his risen and glorified body. The matter of Jesus' earthly body was transformed into the matter of the world to come. So the process, in my view, has begun. That's why the empty tomb is very important to Christians. It's a sign that in Christ there is a hope not only for humanity, but for the whole material universe.
So what you're saying, because it wasn't just Jesus' soul that was made into something new, and the body just disintegrated. The body itself was transformed, which suggests to you a transformation of the entire matter of the entire universe.
I think that's the seed event, so to speak, from which the eventual transformation of the whole matter of the universe will grow.
And what will that ultimate universe be like? I mean, the Bible talks about a heavens and earth. How much progress can we make, however darkly?
Well, wait and see, I think, is the main answer to that question. But I think there will be some other forms of continuity that carry over. For example, I think it's intrinsic to human beings, not only that we're embodied, but we're also temporal beings. So I think the life of the world to come will be a temporal life. It won't be a moment of timeless illumination. It will be an unfolding process. God is patient and subtle, works through process. Our fulfillment is going to be drawing closer and closer to the unveiled reality of the divine presence, sharing in the divine life in that sort of way.
And would that involve the entirety of the universe?
In appropriate ways, I believe, yes. I think that God has a destiny for the whole of creation in the ways that are appropriate. Human beings will have a destiny as self-conscious, God-conscious human beings. Sticks and stones will obviously have a somewhat different destiny. But the big question is, if the new creation is going to be so wonderful, a world free of transience and death and suffering and so on, why did God bother with the old creation? That's the key question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think the answer is that God's creative purposes are necessarily two-step. God brings into being this world in which creatures live at some distance from the divine reality to be free to be themselves, to make themselves. But God's eventual intention is that they should freely enter into into union with the divine life. But we have to have that sort of anteroom, so to speak, to be ourselves before we can give ourselves to sharing in the life of God. So that's necessary new creation following upon the old creation.
And in this vision, we will really feel to be ourselves. We will
fully fulfill what it is within us to be. And that will be an unfolding process. It will be an exploratory process and a creative process within ourselves. Yes. I mean, it's a mysterious vision, an exciting vision, a vision of very great hope. And obviously, we can't flesh out the details of it, but I don't think it's an incredible. The key issue, really, is the universe a cosmos or a chaos? Steve Weinberg, seeing it all end in apparent futility, thinks it's really a chaos, a meaningless world. I don't think that's right. I think it is a cosmos, it's a creation. But it will only truly be a creation if it does have a fulfilling destiny beyond the transience and mortality of this present world.
If you don't have afterlife for individuals and you don't have a transformation for this universe which is expanding without limit, then it will be chaos. There's no choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, if the only story is science's story of the uninterrupted unfolding of present process, that's Weinberg is right. It does in the end seem to be pointless.
But you see it differently.
But I think there's more to say than that. Yeah.
Quite a bit more.
A lot more, yes, which we aren't able to articulate very clearly. But the key thing is to remember, I think, that it depends upon the faithfulness of God. And of course, as a Christian, I also believe that faithfulness is exemplified in the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
And that this will involve the totality of existence. It won't just be limited in some way to human beings going off someplace to.
No, I don't think so. I think God cares for the whole of creation. And in fact, there are passages in the Bible that make that pretty clear, both in the Hebrew Scriptures and, of course, also in the New Testament. I mean, the universe matters to God, I think. It's not just there to be the backdrop of the human drama taking place 13.7 billion years after the overture began, so to speak.
Because the universe today does look chaotic.
It's a mixture of order and disorder. Yes, that's right. And that's because it's a thermodynamic world, which matter does drift in the direction of disorder. And if there is to be a lasting final fulfillment, it will have to be a different form of matter. But I don't think it's incoherent to believe that God can bring that into being. But I think it's theologically coherent to believe that God only ultimately brings that into being. Because a world which is an evolving world in the strict biological sense, in which creatures make themselves, has to be a world in which there is change and decay. The new life of one generation is purchased at the cost of the death of the old.
Sure. If one can make the leap to believe that God created the universe in the first place, it's actually less of a leap of faith to go to the next step, that he could recreate a new kind of matter.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes. I mean, that's right. Yes. But it's important to see that it's part of a single plan. As I say, not God saying, "Oh dear, I made rather a mess of that. I'll try and do better the second time." That wouldn't make much theological sense.